Thank you for tuning in to GothamSound.tv. Today I am joined by Karl Winkler of Lectrosonics. Hi, Karl.
Hello, how's everybody?
Thank you so much for being here.
Well, of course, yeah. Thanks for inviting me, and happy to share some knowledge.
Yeah, and you are live from the factory at Lectrosonics where you're working on the new very big MTCR, it looks like.
That's actually an LR behind me there.
Oh,
It was a Halloween costume from a few years ago when that was a brand new product, and we take Halloween pretty seriously around here. So, trying to think up what I'm going to do for this year. Haven't come up with it yet.
okay. Well, stay tuned. So exciting news from Lectrosonics. So you are now remind me of your title. It's very cool and big sounding, but remind me of your new title.
Sure, it's Executive Vice President of Product Design and Distribution. So it's all the front-facing, customer-facing side of the business, from customer service to listening to ideas about products and features to working with the dealer network and getting the products out there.
Yeah. And that is a well-deserved title change. And part of that is because Gordon Moore, who's been at Lectrosonics for 35 years, announced his retirement.
That's right, yes. Gordon Moore, who has been at the helm for quite some time as president, and before that many, many years as vice president of sales, and he's going to be 70 this fall. So, yep, he's hanging up the hat, and however, he's going to stay involved by being on the board. And as he told us, he's not selling his shares, so I'm sure he'll want to see us succeed.
That's great. That's great. So I want to remind people watching that we're live. So if you have comments, you can put them in the chat, and we will get to them as soon as we can when appropriate. And Karl, I know you prepared some things to talk about, so I want to really turn it over to you, and let's see what
Sure.
you wanted to share.
Sure enough. Well, Wireless Designer has been kind of the cornerstone of our wireless system management since around 2015. And it's been added on to over the years. It's got a number of powerful features and tools to help users keep track of their wireless system and do frequency coordination and all that sort of thing. So I wanted to go over a number of things about the software, starting with an introduction. So let me share screen, and we'll take it from there.
And I should mention that this is just something that popped into my head, but Lectrosonics has a Electro U online classes, which I found also very helpful. So
Yes,
you should check
thanks for
that out.
mentioning that. Yeah, it's a training program on a number of topics, everything from microphone wiring to Wireless Designer, as you mentioned, to some of the tips and tricks about RF and frequency coordination. It's a free course. All you got to do is go to the website, look up resources, Electro U training courses, sign up and take the courses, and if you complete it, we'll send you a certificate. And one of the important components of that training is Wireless Designer. So there's been people who have asked for more in-depth training so they can do better in the Electro U courses, and that's part of what we're doing today.
Yep. And I do have my certificate, in case anybody was wondering.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for going through there. I hope it was helpful.
It was.
Great. Okay, so you should see my screen now with Wireless Designer, and I've got a basic system connected already, consisting of a DCR822, M2T transmitter, and then a DSQD, just showing the fact that you can connect different types of systems, whether they be transmitters or receivers, as long as they are compatible with Wireless Designer, which most of our stuff is. So at the upper left, and the left part of the screen here, we call this the tree view. So at the very upper left, we can see what I call the stack, which is here are the devices in this system. Now I can click on individual frames, like I'm clicking on the DCR822 now, and you see that that's highlighted. And I'm looking at those two receiver channels. I can look at my M2T alone and my DSQD. And it's important to remember the difference between a frame view, which is any one of those individual items in the system, or the stack, which is all the items in the system. If we're looking at an individual unit, we can also look at the settings, and I'm going to click on settings here. This would be the same kind of thing you'd see in your menu structure of the unit. description. You can lock out your front panel, determine your encryption key type. Tuning groups are hosted there, and this is handy. You can look up your firmware. Not everyone knows this. It's another place to find that. You can find it in the menu of your unit, but you can also find it here in Wireless Designer. So that would be true of any one of these units. If I click on the settings for the M2T, there's our network settings, front panel, and description. Yeah?
And with the firmware, the Wireless Designer is also used to update firmware, which obviously we're not talking about, but that's an important piece.
It is, and now that you mention it, let me explain. Sometimes people say, hey, I've connected to my unit, and yet I can't seem to do firmware updates. It's a separate type of connection. You cannot be connected to it and monitoring it while you're doing a firmware update. So I'm going to pull down the Connect Live here, and notice that update firmware is grayed out because I'm connected. If I were to disconnect, and we will do that here in a minute, we'll stop and take a look at update firmware, because you get to choose what type of device it is, and then it will connect and do the firmware update. So that's an important part of Wireless Designer. So thanks for mentioning that.
And it makes it really simple. Just to, as somebody who's done it before, it's very easy to update the firmware using this.
Yeah, it is. And in a way, you should think of Wireless Designer as kind of a home base for all these kind of things. When you're doing your prep work and updating the firmware in your hardware, this is the place to do it. Then connect to everything, do frequency coordination, and you can even do offline sessions, which I'll talk about as well. So notice that if I'm looking at a frame, let's say here I'm looking at the DCR822, I've got 4 tabs across the top here. There's the channels, view, frequency coordination. I see it switching back and forth. I can scan, and then for this frame, and it's specific to each frame, is the walk test recorder. This is a really cool feature that I'm going to talk about a little bit more later on, but you only see this when you're looking at a frame view, not the stack. So I just wanted to make that distinction. Sometimes people call and say, I want to do walk test and I can't find it. Well, it's because you got to click on one of the frames, because it's only going to record one channel at a time. So just be aware of that. So one thing too to mention is that the software-hardware relationship. Nick Mariano, our Southeast US rep, mentioned this to me. He said, be sure everyone knows that settings are stored on the hardware, which will continue to operate uninterrupted, independent of Wireless Designer, even if it's disconnected. So that means as long as you have the settings transferred from Wireless Designer into your hardware, and the hardware is running fine, Wireless Designer could go down. Your computer could crash, you could lose your network connection, and it will not interrupt the hardware itself. So we can be monitoring things here, but just keep that in mind, that the hardware doesn't lose its settings just because we lost Wireless Designer. Another thing I want to mention is that Wireless Designer is on our website, free to download, and there is a revision history there. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to share our website just to show where that is. Let's see here. I was looking at, here we go. You should see the Wireless Designer revision history page. This is found under Support, Wireless Designer, and Revision History. The reason I bring this up is if you're ever wondering what the latest features are, or if you have the latest version of Wireless Designer, this is where you can come to check that out. So you'll notice here that the latest updates, 2.0.50 for Mac and 2.0.52 for Windows, that just came out a couple days ago, we've added firmware update capability for the new DSR. And this is a fairly common thing to see a new product show up here before it's even released, because we need to be able to update it and the beta testers need to be able to update it. So if you ever wonder what's about to hit the street, a product we've announced but haven't shipped yet, oftentimes you'll find it right here. And the DSR is getting very close to being shipping. We've got some beta testing going on right now, as a matter of fact. So that's where you can find it out. So you look at the next entry there, Wireless Designer 2.0.49 for Mac. We put support for a future model M2T for Europe in the B1C1 band, and some other features as well. So this is great reading because you can really see kind of the progress of what features and capabilities have been added to Wireless Designer over time and what the latest things are. So it's another way to find out, hey, do I need to update it? Well, take a look here and see if there's anything that you think you're going to need. If not, no reason to update it if it's working.
Well, that's really interesting about, in terms of checking in about what's coming up, and that little nugget is pretty cool. So
yeah. All right, so let me get back to sharing the Wireless Designer screen. All right. So now let's talk about connecting. Okay, I've already got this system connected, but let's disconnect it. And the way to do that is come up to the upper left, connect live, and we're going to disconnect from, you can pick any one of the three that I've got, or all devices. So I'm going to choose that one. And notice now that we're disconnected, update firmware is accessible, and we can pick which kind of products you're going to update. So that wasn't available before because we were connected. And notice DSR series, DSR4, and if you're wondering why doesn't it also say DSR, because you have that now. Well, I didn't update this because I was doing a live stream, and you know you never update your software right before a big project. So as soon as we're done here, I'm going to do that. So that's how to update the firmware. You would connect it by USB in the case of the units with USB jacks, and they're all listed here. So here's all your D² series, here's all your DCHT, DCHR, digital hybrid, the ones that would connect by USB, and so on. All right, so now let's connect back to our hardware. There's a couple different ways to do that, and I want to talk about this so that everyone understands the easiest way to do it. First off, let's connect by USB, and I've got one of my three units, the DCR822 is USB only. It doesn't have an Ethernet jack, so this is the way to connect it to Wireless Designer. And notice anything that was connected, if there was more units, we'd see them all here. In fact, there's a button that says Connect All. If you've got multiple units. It doesn't show up with only one. This is what's here. You actually see the serial number and the device type. So I'm going to say OK, and it's going to look a lot like it did a minute ago, but I've still only got the one connected. Now let's go to Network, where I have the other two units connected. And if this is the first time you're doing this, you'll need to match your IP numbers. Your hardware will need to be connected to a network switch, and then I usually use DHCP so that the switch assigns the IP addresses. So it's kind of automatic that way. And then I simply copy those over here. Now, because I've done it before, these numbers are going to show up here already. And there we see, there's my DSQD, number 107. And then we'll see the M2T, number 143. And notice that it's in this list of devices I've connected before. All right, so that is the process of connecting by USB or network. Now that I've done this, and I'm back to where I was before, what I always recommend everyone do if they're going to be using the same system over and over, like on a cart, for example, or even in a bag, is to save connections to list. So this is going to, whatever I've got connected right now, it's going to let me name this. So let's say this is Gotham Live Stream today. Okay, I'm going to save that. So now everything I've just connected here, it's saved as a connections list. So let's disconnect from all. And now I can open connections from list. And here you see some of my tests from the other day and earlier and so on. And bang, all three devices connected. So this is definitely an important shortcut for anyone who's using the same system over and over.
And I want to highlight something that you just touched on, which is about the idea of using this in a bag, because the new receivers, the DCR-822, the DSR, the DSR-4, they do
Yeah,
have the capability to work with Wireless Designer. And as you're, cramming more and more channels in a bag, the idea of being able to do your frequency coordination, pull out a small laptop or a Surface Go or something like that, open
hmm
up Wireless Designer, do the coordination between all your channels quickly, then throw it back in the backpack and go. Pretty cool.
absolutely. And I'm seeing it more often. It's wonderful to see how often Wireless Designer is out there. Like on Instagram, when people tag us and we go look, it's like it's on carts everywhere, but it's also starting to be on more portable systems.
Mm-hmm.
And people ask us about tablets and so on, and of course they'd love to have iOS, which we've worked on, but it's been hard to finish because we are short programmers,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. But it's still in the queue. We will get it done. But in the meantime, I was using the Surface Pro 3 for quite some time. It worked really great, and it's not very big. But there's even smaller ones than that. Like you said, there's the Surface not Pro. What is it? The Surface Go,
Yeah,
I think
Surface Go.
is
Mm-hmm.
like that's perfect, and it'll definitely run Wireless Designer. It's not a super heavy software in terms of system requirements, so it'll work on those for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now that we're connected, I hope that helps people understand the easy, efficient way to do this, but that saving and recalling a connections list is a big one. We do that even at the trade shows. On setup day, we do all these save connections lists, and then on the first day of the show, we come in, turn on the computer, load from list, bang, we're ready to go. And of course, it's different hardware every time we do a show, so we need to do it again. All right, so in terms of building a system, you've already seen how I've connected to my hardware, but let me disconnect here for a second because, well, I don't even need to disconnect to do this, but you can also be doing an offline session.
Hmm.
And hopefully everyone knows about this, but what this does is lets you basically design a system without being connected. For instance, in advance, you may have a show coming up where you're going to bring a cart and a fairly sophisticated system with a decent number of channels, and you know what they are, so you can be adding frames. Let's say I've got a couple of DSQDs, and I've got an M2T for my boom op, and the producer likes to listen high quality, so that's my stack. It's not connected to anything, so you don't see any activity here, and you don't have a way to scan anything. But in the frequency coordination window, you can import scan data. So that's one of the reasons why we have a global scan database on our website. And so let me go back there just for a second and share that, because this is a resource that everyone should know about, because those files are in our format, SDF or in CSV. Both are usable by Wireless Designer.
Hmm.
So let me go back here, stop sharing that, show you where that is.
And so the idea behind this is you could be, at the airport, let's say, and downloading these files for wherever you're traveling to, doing your frequency coordination as a plan, so that when you get in, you can hit the ground running.
Exactly right. And of course, you're likely to need to make tweaks when you get there, but it can save an awful lot of time to have a project file that's got all your hardware in there. And you've even done an initial frequency coordination or band plan. So we'll get into some of the ways that you might want to specifically do that. So on the website, under resources, the third thing down on the right is global RF scans. And here's where you see there's dozens, or maybe at this point hundreds, of scans from all over the place. For instance, here's a Pac-12 network broadcast facility in California, and you can download this file in SDF format and bring it right in.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to point out where to find that, and we'd love for people to also upload scans when they are in those places so that others can have that information. And that's all of what you see there is users who have uploaded scans. So let me get back to the screen and I'll show you how to do that. So I've got an offline session here, and I'm going to import a scan data from file, and it's right here in the middle. And let's take Dodger Stadium, is one of the ones I downloaded earlier, and we open it up, and there we go. So we have a scan. It's the real RF data from a particular location that I can bring into this offline session and do my coordination effort. Okay, so I just want to mention that because a lot of times people think of this as, well, I got to connect to my hardware. Not necessarily. And I can keep these two things happening at the same time. So I can have this offline session that is basically unrelated to my connected units. So you could even be, let's say, on a set working on what you're doing now and nothing's happening at the moment, so you can build your system for the next job you're going to do. So it's a handy tool, the offline session. Hope that makes sense to everybody. So then,
and I should just interrupt to say that you know, since you're addressing people, if you do have questions for Karl, please leave them in the chat. And we have had some people say hello. I'm not going to try names because I'm going to butcher them, but we've got people from Serbia watching. So just wanted to let you know.
Very good. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Okay. So I wanted everyone to understand the difference between offline, which is not connected to your hardware, and then the connected version. And they can be completely separate, or you can even be doing some background work with the same kind of system and then transfer it over or merge them, if you will. So another thing about this tree view is that I can rearrange it if I feel like the hierarchy needs to be different. For instance, I can right-click on any one of the frames and notice that it says move down. So let's go ahead and do that. Now my tree is DSQD at the top, DCR822, and then M2T. And that's really, I know I myself am very particular about channel order, hardware order, the way things are in the rack, the way things are here. So if you're like me and you want to organize that, you can certainly do that. And it will remember that in the connections list, by the way. So we'll move it back up to where it was. Let's see. Next, I want to show you the device settings. This is actually where you would go in to do a lot of your very specific programming for the devices you're going to be using. So for instance, we're back here in the channel all frames view, and I'm going to double click on one of these receiver modules. Notice that they're broken up by the channel itself. So the DCR822, I've got one of those connected, but it really looks to Wireless Designer like two separate receivers, because that's what it is. So in this detail view, I've just double clicked on one and it comes up and the module is powered. I can turn it off to save power. There was a nice thread about that the other day. I've named it. This channel is named Peter. It's on 595.175. I can give it a custom tuning range, and this is where we get into band planning. I'm going to talk about that a little more in a minute, but this is a powerful feature because oftentimes we want to keep our IFBs, our IEMs, and our wireless mic talent channels separate so they don't step on each other. It's a good way to avoid interfering with yourself. For instance, this receiver, I might give it a custom tuning range of, let's say, 510 megahertz. I went out of range. Hold on. 510 megahertz up to 608, let's say. Now what that's going to do is it won't tune outside of that range, nor will it automatically do a frequency coordination outside of that range. So now we've kind of restricted the range of that unit. You can determine whether or not it's going to be in a tuning group, what type of diversity. In this case, on the 822, you can pick between vector and frequency diversity. For those that don't know, vector is the diversity using two front-end receivers, and then it's adjusting phase angles between the two signals and combining them together to get the best, strongest signal. Works very well. Frequency diversity is the sort of bomb-proof, redundant type system where you actually have two mics, two transmitters, each on a different frequency, and it's going to come in and be blended together here. And when you do this, there's a calibration step that you want to do to match levels. So frequency diversity is not very often used, but it's the kind of thing that's nice to have it when you need it. The other thing that's in here is talkback enablement or not. If you do enable it, you decide what type of talkback it's going to be, whether it's override mix or talkback only coming out the talkback channel. and where it's routed. On the DCR822, it's nice because you've got 2 AES outputs giving you 4 audio channels out. So I could route my talkback channel on this receiver to an unused channel, if you want to think of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where all that happens. Not all receivers offer that, but the 822 does. Then over to the right on the detail view, we see here our compatibility mode, drop menu. We're in D2 mode for a digital transmitter, but you can see here I can do all kinds of stuff here between EU hybrid, Japanese hybrid, the high density mode, as well as mono or both channels of duet or DCHX. So all those compat modes are available. With a hybrid receiver, of course, you'd only see the hybrid modes, but with the digital receivers, you see both.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can mute my channel, and that shows up in the overall view. That just mutes your audio output from that channel. And what type of output you have set up. In this case, I have AES3 output coming from that receiver, and where that channel is routed. And I have it routed to the most obvious place, which is AES1 left. And then if we go over to the next channel, we will see that it goes to AES2 left, but I would probably put it in AES1 right. So those 2 channels come out of 1 connector, not 2.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's called Nick, and it's on 591.600. I don't have a custom range for it, but I could. So, and then let's take a look at transmitter settings. You can see there's a ton of information to grok while looking at the software. Here is where I might give my transmitter itself a custom name, or I could use my receiver name, which I will. Now it's Nick. Here's where I would pick my battery type, and for digital channels, something to remember is that you set battery type in the transmitter, not in the receiver, because it's actually doing voltage decoding and sending data rather than just analog information. And here I can enable my battery timer alarm and set a threshold for it, in which case you say, well, it's going to be an LB50, and it normally runs for 6 hours, so I'm going to put this at 5 hours and 30 minutes. So it'll trigger me well before the battery runs out, so I can do a change. All right, so that's all the information in here. Now if we go over to the DSQD, these things look a little different because the options aren't exactly the same, but it should be pretty familiar. Same kind of thing, options for the transmitters. Now if we're looking at the M2T, and I've got to scroll all the way over 4 channels away, this is a transmitter, not a receiver. So the transmitter tab's on the left. We can name the transmitter. Let's say IEM TX1. It's on, this channel's on 476.125. I can give it a custom range, and let's go ahead and do that. Let's say this one's going to go from 470 to 500. So that's not going to step on my receivers now. And here I can determine my transmitter output power. It's set at 25 milliwatts. I can even name each audio channel, because oftentimes with the duet system, especially in the IFB capacity, people are going to use it in mono. And so you might want to name it Anchor 1, Weather, Correspondent, Sports, whatever the feed itself is if you're using mono feeds. So you can do that here. And then on the receiver side, that's the pack that someone wears, so it's kind of backwards, and you got to always be remembering that. Here's what kind of mix mode it is. Now, once I've done all these things for either the transmitter that's portable or the receiver in this case, I can send these settings to the unit via infrared. So here's sync frequency, sync all, get frequency, get all. These buttons here. And all of the transmitters, when you're talking receivers, will have something like that. So here's send key, send settings, get settings on one of our DCR822 channels. So as you can see, there's really a lot of information here. I recommend everyone kind of go through this and look at everything that's there and play around with it to get familiar with it.
And
Any questions from you, Nick, or anyone watching at this point?
There's a couple of questions and comments. So
Great.
Bruno from Rio de Janeiro wants to know if there's a plan to install Wireless Designer on Linux, which I haven't heard of anybody using Linux in a bit, but it's very cool. Raspberry
Probably
Pi.
not anytime soon. Yeah, we want to get it on iOS next, I think, and there's some new products that we need to make it compatible with. That's certainly going to happen first. But if there's a lot of requests for Linux, we would consider it. Basically, it's just that we're resource constrained with the programming time, which is always a challenge.
Yep.
That's the only thing really stopping us.
And then I think that leads right into the next question is about, Wireless Designer working with the DSR4 and what the timeline is for that.
That is very, very close, and it's a high priority. The guys were talking yesterday, they're working out a few little bugs and some efficiency, but we should see that within a few weeks. So
Great.
we're very close on DSR4 compatibility.
Oh, that's
Finally.
amazing. That is sooner than I had expected. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, we should have had it a while ago, but again, back to all the things going on and not enough programmers to do it.
Yeah, you can only do what people have time to do. So another question from Richard Bullock wants to know if you can spend a little bit more time and walk through the process of taking an offline coordination session and deploying it into a system. He specifically brings the Electro 822 and a laptop on Tech Scouts, and then once home works on the frequency coordination there.
Great, yes, I plan to talk about that, so now is as good a time as any. So if you're going to do that, of course, you want to make sure that you have exactly the same hardware, right? So let's go back to my offline. Let me close this out. Go back to offline, and I've got a slightly different system here. I've got two DSQDs, so let me remove this frame and add in an 822. If I have it here. Here we go. And I'll do an A1B1, which is what I have. So, okay, now I've basically got the same system on both of these. I'm going to move this up so that they're in the same order, just because that's how I am. And I think in the other one, M2T is at the bottom. All right, that's how it is. Okay, great. So what I want to do is, for instance, let's say this is what we're going to do. We're going to go to Dodger Stadium, and this is our system. We brought in this scan. We're going to do a frequency coordination, which I hadn't really got to yet, but I'll do a quick one. When you're doing a frequency coordination based on a scan like this, one of the things you want to do is move this threshold line, this is that red line horizontal near the bottom, as low as possible while still leaving room for your channels. So you want to move it to where that there's still some cracks or open frequencies below that. Now there's a lot of DTV in LA near Dodger Stadium, but there's some notches in between some of these channels that are probably exploitable. And one way to do that, by the way, is to zoom in so you can really see the details of what's going on in this scan. And notice that, for instance, now that I've zoomed in, I can see a notch there at about 536 megahertz, one just above 542, one just below 548, and so on. So that should work pretty well. That should give us some room to do our coordination. I'm going to say coordinate selected channels. That's all of them. And it's going to put my channels where it thinks there'll be no conflicts based on this scan. Then I will deploy to system. That means that my quote-unquote hardware, which is sort of theoretical at this point, is now tuned to those frequencies. I want to now save this. Let's see. Save as, we're going to give this a name, offline OG3 Dodgers Stadium as an example. Okay, so now what I can do with my connected system is to load that file. So we're going to discard changes and load. It asks you that because we're going to blow away the settings we have now. And if you've got transmitters connected and running and you're in the middle of something, this will wipe you off the map, okay? Because we're going to load in different frequencies. So now I've opened that. It gives me some options here if I want or don't want some of the things that are in that session file. But I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, we'll do all of it. Now it's loading those settings into my hardware, and things don't look so rosy now because these frequencies aren't for Rio Rancho, New Mexico. They're for Dodger Stadium. So my noise floor is much higher here because we've landed probably on some DTV stations. But that's how you do it. You create an offline session, you do a coordination based on a scan, and then you save that as a session file. Then I can bring that session file into a live connected system, which you've just seen us do. Hope that answers those questions.
Yeah. So specifically for Richard, so if he was taking a DCR 822, can you show us how you would do a scan on that, save the scan data, and then deploy that out across an offline session?
Sure enough. Okay, great. So here we're going to, in this case, use the 822. In fact, I'm going to, let's see here. Probably the thing to do is disconnect everything else so that we're only looking at that in this case. And here, oh, he's talking about using it in the field though, so he's not going to be connected to this. Let's see.
Well, he actually says he brings an 822 and a laptop with him, so it seems like he's able to scan on Wireless Designer and save the scans.
That's great then. In that case, we would come here to, we'd be connected. We would come here to the frequency scan page, go ahead and do a start. And this is going to see what's really here in the local place, wherever you are with your unit. And it's got a fair amount of detail in the scan. It always starts from whatever frequency it was on before and goes through the whole band available to it and then keeps going. And I usually recommend a couple of passes if you've got the time to do it, because sometimes there's intermittent things that turn on and off and you want to catch those things.
Right, yeah, especially being down in that 470 band where police and fire can be, and that certainly requires some monitoring.
It does. In fact, I noticed a pretty big variance just in the last couple of days kind of setting up and doing these tests, that there was something that would appear and disappear down in that 480 range. It's pretty interesting. All right, so we've done one complete round, and here's our scan. Now we can already, directly from here, export to file, and we can call this, let's say, OG3 Rio Rancho test, not text, test. Okay. Now, when I come back over here, by the way, I can be showing multiple scans. That's something else that Nick Mariano wanted me to mention, is at the moment we're only looking at the last thing that we brought in, which is the Dodger Stadium. But I can turn that off using this here and go right back to what I had before, which is Rio Rancho. Okay, and that is in the frequency coordination overall tab, and then right under that is I can be looking at my channels, which right now only connected are the two DCR 822 channels. I can look at my conflict list, and I can look at scan data. No conflicts, why? Because there's no scan data. All right, so now what we'll do is we'll import scan data. Oh, I see, I imported it from my frequency scan. Let me clear that, that's the wrong one. I want to import it from a file, I think is what he's asking about. And here's my August 3 Rio Rancho test SDF scan data file, and we bring it in. Now we've got conflicts. So of course we're connected, but kind of what you're asking, I think what he was asking is maybe how do I do that offline,
right,
which we kind of showed before, but that's fine, we can do it now. Here's my offline system and frequency coordination. We were looking at Dodger Stadium a minute ago, and here's where my channels are sort of set in my theoretical system. Let's go ahead and import scan data from file, and we'll choose that one that we just generated with the 822, and there it is. And again, it's pretty unhappy because we were using a different scan a minute ago to do our coordination. And now what I would do is reset my threshold just a little bit higher to make sure that there's some cracks underneath it. Of course, There's a lot more room up here in the B1 band than there is at Dodger Stadium, now that we're here in Rio Rancho. So now I would do my coordinate selected channels. It's going to put everything right up there where there's some open spots, and we'll deploy the system. So my theoretical system is now tuned, and I could save that like I did before as a session. Save as offline, give it a name. Let's say OG3 Rio Rancho test. Did it again. And then later when I'm connected, I have to connect to everything. And then I could bring that in. So hopefully that all makes sense. I would import, let's see, let me disconnect from everything first. So we're going to connect from list, and that's the same system that we had modeled, right? And then I would open connections from list. Oh, that's already there. I would file, load session from file, and I'm going to load the one that we just made.
So essentially, it's seeming like if I was doing a feature and I was doing the scan, like Richard talked about, I would probably name the session file for each location, so that I could show up to Dodger Stadium or Citi Field if you're a Mets fan, and then just import that when I roll up in the day. Maybe create a report so that my boom op or third can program the transmitters ahead of time, and then just be able to roll right in.
That's right. Absolutely. And in fact, there is a report generator in here. I think that's going to be here. I thought there was. I don't see it now, but
I've definitely, I think it's under frequency coordination, but I've definitely seen the create report.
You're right.
Yeah, I use it often.
Yep.
It's very helpful. And it's just a way to, create a CSV or a PDF file and share it with people.
That's right. You are right. That's where it is. Thanks for helping me find that. Here is where you generate a report, and it's going to create this kind of file right here. So you can hand this around to your team. It's even going to show what it showed in the scan. And I've got all that turned off. So there we go. Now let's generate a report, and bang, and there's everything you need.
Great. Yeah. Oh, and it even shows the picture at the bottom. That's new for me. That's cool. I like that.
Yes.
So a couple of comments that have come in that I want to get to.
Great.
So first of all, Richard said thank you. That's interesting. It sounds like we answered the question. So fantastic.
Great.
And Marlo Taylor, who's one of my favorite people and a big Electro fan. Joe, I don't know if it's possible to scroll down.
No, but
Joe is going to read this question.
Down the road, will our DR4, DCR22, D-squared receivers be able to handle remote changes of the transmitter, which I assume a new designed electro transmitter to handle that, or will we need entirely new receivers?
And similarly, Zoran asked, will there be an option in the near future to control the transmitter gain frequency wirelessly? So I assume these are like, I don't know how much you can look into the box or the future, but people are always asking about the future.
They are, and of course, and so are we. To answer the first part of the question, yes, Wireless Designer will be part of that equation, and existing receivers will also be part of that equation. There will need to be some new hardware, of course, transmitters capable of doing that, and something that will send them a signal based on what Wireless Designer tells it to do. So all those things are in the plans.
Cool, that's great. And just a couple of other comments. Jeff Delorier, who we have a DSR video that we're working, a DSR4 video that we're working on, says thanks, Karl and Gotham. So thank you, Jeff, and we'll see you on this weekend. And then Richard said that he loves overlaying multiple scans. That it's a great feature.
Yes, absolutely. It's how I was able to see the changes in Rio Rancho. Let me see if I can grab that. It's pretty interesting. Let's see, where's the one from a few days ago?
And just
This was an older one, but it might, yeah, see, there we go. These are two different Rio Rancho scans, and it looks like they're at a little bit of a different level. But what you can see is down here between 470 and 480 that there's a big bump that was there then that is not there now. Even though most of the peaks are about the same height. Although up here in the mid-band from block 20 to 21 and so on, the DTV looks a lot higher than it does now. But yeah, overlaying those scans can be really interesting to see what's changed over time if you're looking at the same location.
And that could just be based on setup or antenna placement or...
Yes.
Yeah.
All factors for sure.
The one thing I want to touch on that I thought was really cool was being able, when you talked about band planning and being able to set the custom range. So if you were looking at, let's say you looked at your frequency scan, if we can bring that back up, and you were thinking about where to put your M2T in terms of your band plan, just looking at the scan and then all your talent wireless, just looking at your scan data, what would your instincts be for that?
Yeah, normally I'm going to try and what I call sequester the various devices into certain pockets. Okay, so for instance, it's not uncommon to put your IFBs or your IEMs at one end or the other of the spectrum available. And it looks like we've got some nice pockets here in Rio Rancho. So I would say, and here's where you can do that from this window, by the way, picking your custom channels. You don't need to go back to detail view. You can do it right here in the channel list and the frequency coordination tab. So I'm going to take my two M2T channels here, and here is where you would say, yes, I want custom ranges for these. And normally I'm going to say start at 470 and end at 500, for instance, megahertz. Okay. Now, once I've done that on this one, and by the way, it moves it because it was somewhere else, and now it's going to put it into this zone. I can right-click on that one that I just did, copy custom range, and paste it into the next one. So this is really a nice shortcut for speeding things up when you got a lot of channels to deal with. Because normally you're not going to put every channel on a different custom range. You're going to put, let's say you got two DSQDs. All of those are going to be in the same custom range, and then your M2Ts in a different custom range. So, and let's do that. So I'm going to say my DSQDs now, I don't want them down in that 470 to 500 range. I want them higher than that. So we'll start at, let's say 505 megahertz up to 614. Okay. And once again, I can copy that custom range, paste it into the next four. So this becomes very nice and quick.
So you're going to put a minimum of 5 megahertz of separation between your, let's say, your IFB sends and your receive send and your receives,
and sometimes more. It's how much you can get away with.
Right.
It looks to me like I could get away with a lot, so I might do that. But in this case, 5's a good margin. Now, when I do my coordination based on this scan, it's going to put those things where it thinks they belong. Now, I forgot that my 822 channels, I didn't give them custom ranges yet, but I probably should. Let me redo those and paste the last one, so that's 505. Okay, and let's redo it again now that I've done that. So now you notice that my IEMs are way down here and my mic channels are way up here. And that's by using these custom ranges. And you can have as many as you want, and they can be as narrow or wide as you want, as long as they're within the bandwidth of the device.
Yeah,
and all of that gets saved. But all of that gets saved in the project file.
Yeah, so the reason that I'm excited about this feature is that that's something that we deal with a lot in terms of like band planning, where somebody wants to get IFBs, and they maybe accidentally bought a transmitter that's in the same frequency range as their talent receives, and oftentimes that IFB transmitter will step on the talent receive. So it's really this is me just highlighting, like, it's a good idea, pick a different block, 941 or B1 if you're an A1, or even the VHF spectrum to give yourself some flexibility and really protect your talent receive.
No, it's a great point. I'm a big advocate of band planning like that, and you make a great point. I mean, sometimes that's what they have available is, let's say, an IFB on block 22 and a talent mic on block 22. Well, the best thing to do is to sequester, your IFB down at the bottom end and put your talent at the top, or the other way around, so they're as far away from each other as possible. And this is one way to do that. Another thing that gets brought up is, hey, I still have an SMQV and it's only a 1-block transmitter. How do I do this? Well, this is one way you could do it, is give it a custom range, but that's a little bit cumbersome. We have an easier way to do that. Let's say that we, where am I going? Let's say DSQD channel 2. Actually, I've already got something like that on channel 3. This is is it this one? Oh, it's the different session file. Okay, we're going to set up channel 3 as a channel for an SMQV. So we want it to be in new hybrid mode, first off. Then when I go to transmitter, I'm going to give it a restricted transmitter range. And as soon as I do that, A1, B1 goes away, and it's offering me A1, B1, or any one of these blocks. So let's just say that happens to be an SMQV on 20. I set it at 20, and now that's the only place this will let it go. Mm-hmm. That unit is in 20, period.
And so
there it is.
You'd have to recalc based on that new information.
That's right, because it moved it, since it's got to put it somewhere within the band I said it's going to live in. And it may not be a very good band. In fact, well, let's see. It looks like a decent crack right there. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, and it's really a cool feature of Wireless Designer, is you can manually move these channels as well. And one of the things that happens when you do that is you can see the intermod frequencies moving around. Those are here, these little orange lines. Those are third order intermods, which are usually the ones you want to concern yourself with. So I can move this, and notice that even when I get it into that crack, which is the biggest crack that looks like it's in block 20, it's still saying a conflict because of where I have my threshold set. Okay, so it may just be that, for a realistic system, given this scan and the fact that I'm trying to use an SMQV on block 20, I may need to move my threshold up just a hair, and I barely moved it, and now this is not a conflict because I've got it in that crack.
And what do you typically, what do you typically set the threshold to? And if you were looking at the, just the scan data coming in on the stack, where would you, if you saw, your noise floor, where would that be that would give you pause to be like, oh, maybe I need to rescan or change things around?
No, it's a great point, and this comes up quite often, that, hey, the noise floor is really high, and I can only move my threshold up to, let's say, 20 dB microvolts, and it's not enough. What that tells me is that you've got too much gain coming in on your front end. Either you've got directional antennas and short cables, which, you're adding 4 dB or 5 dB on your antennas and short cables, and you're just kind of pounding the front end of the receivers, or you have amplified antennas and they're boosted too much. So the answer there, and we say this a lot in our line of work, is filter and attenuate. You want the right RF gain structure. So if I saw a scan that had a really high noise floor, I would probably either turn down my boosters on my antennas, and let's say ALP 690 is a very popular antenna with boost or cut. You've got plus up to 12 dB and minus up to 12 dB. Very handy to just take a few dB out and lower that noise floor. Your receivers will be much happier and get much better performance. It's definitely a misconception that more boost means more range. You get much better performance out of your system if it's just right. I liken it to like a carburetor or a gasoline engine. More gas doesn't always mean the right thing. You have to have exactly the right ratio of gas to air to get the right combustion, the most efficient power. So same thing here. But to answer your direct question about where do I set the threshold, it's always going to be as low as possible and still get a coordination to complete.
And then if you were looking, let's say you're looking at the stack window where you see, kind of just the incoming data coming, where would you look at that and be like, oh, there's too much RF energy on that channel. I've got to take a look at this.
Yeah, so here's an example. Frankly, it's that very channel, right? So I'm back to my channels view. I'm looking at the 10 seconds of history on each channel in terms of RF energy coming in. And the one that jumps out at me is this channel 3. We found a notch, but that notch is not all the way down to the, low enough. We're still seeing some energy there. Well, as all things, I guess, try it and see. If you've got an SMQV, that means you can easily use 100 milliwatts and maybe even 250. The success with RF is always about a signal to noise ratio. If you've got a fairly high noise floor, but you've got a really nice, good, strong signal, you'll still be okay.
Right. Yeah, the antenna is exposed, or or you're close to talent or something like that. You can kind of punch through it.
Exactly.
But that would be
this
something
one
that would give you pause in terms of
Yeah.
looking at it and being like, I've got to look at that first and make sure that it's good before I continue.
Yes, I would test this and see if it's going to work. And there's a lot of factors as to whether or not it would work. The other ones, all these other ones look pretty clean. They're just a couple of pixels at the bottom kind of rolling along. Those are pretty clean channels. This is the one that would make me slightly nervous. And boy, if you're up at half, you're going to have trouble.
Gotcha. So Jason wrote in with a question about the start and end range and exclusion. So if his IFB-T4 is in block 21 and he wants to exclude just that block for his A1, B1 receivers, how would he do that? Or is that a possibility, or maybe a future improvement?
It's a future possibility. We don't have a notch. The custom range, I would say, decide whether you want it to be above that block or below that block, but we don't have a way to notch out a block at this time.
Got it. So it might be like when you're doing your scan, just visually look, is there more in A1 or is there more in 22, 23?
Yeah. There is one way, come to think of it, once again, Nick Mariano to the rescue. He's got great ideas about this. A feature I haven't really shown you, though, is that you can do what's called to green out a particular TV channel. So this may be one way to do it. If you right-click on, you notice the TV channels are going to be along here, along this top of your graph of your spectrum scan. And they're numbered. So TV, if I look at block 21 and I want to block that out, I can enable this TV channel, and I would enable all the ones that cover block 21. So this is a workaround, or as close to it as possible. And then it's going to avoid block 21 altogether.
Cool.
Because I've turned these on. If you want to go a little past it, I would include TV 29. Now that's got all of block 21 and a little margin on either side. So I guess there's a way to do it.
That's cool. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, especially giving a little bit of padding with, intermodulation and harmonics and all that jazz. I'm just using
Yeah, you got a
buzzwords.
little
I have
breathing.
no idea what it means.
So,
And that
Yeah,
answers
that's
Jason's question. So that's great.
great.
Thank you.
good deal. So we'll disable those for now. So I'm glad I remembered that again. That was Nick's comment. Be sure to tell him about greening out TV channels. All right, so we talked a lot about most of the things I wanted to cover. One thing we haven't gotten to yet, though, is custom channels. And people ask about this where they say, hey, I've got a something that's not online or connected to my system, like an IFB, a T4 as an example. This is a very common device used along with our other wireless mic systems. So let me show how you would include that in your frequency coordination and keep track of it. And that is right here, custom channels. This is back to the tree view on the left. Custom channels, I'm going to add a custom channel, and I can decide whether when I add it it's locked or not. So for instance, let's say there's an IFB channel that everyone uses at this one particular venue, and I'm thinking of like Santa Fe Opera, which is a 45-minute drive from here. They've got a IFB that is for crew, listen only, that's just always on, always there. So let's say we're going to do that. And I would leave it locked. I would give it a name, IFB crew. The frequency band is going to be a block because the T4 is still block specific. So I'm going to come down here and choose block 23. And I'm going to say that is a transmitter channel. Why? Because when I enter it now and I look back here, it should show up as red or pink. And there it is, IFB crew. It's now in the frequency coordination. And it actually, we got lucky, it doesn't have a conflict. But now, that is one of the last things on my list. And it's locked. If I want to have it, did I unlock it? You can lock it or unlock it. If I lock it, it will not be moved in the coordination. Everything will be moved around it. Or I can say, look, I want it to roam within the block that I've specified for it so that it's part of the coordination, an active part. Then I would unlock it and do a new coordination. Like I said before, we got lucky, that frequency that it's on, and I can look at that here, 588.800 is not a conflict. So transmitters are always going to be red for connected, or receivers are blue, and then if it's a custom channel transmitter, it'll be pink. So let's add a custom channel receiver. Let's say that we have a voice of God mic that's a Shure handheld, something like that. Add a custom channel. We'll say VOG. Again, it's on a fixed frequency. We can tell it what frequency it's going to be on. Let's say it's on 536. And step size 25 kilohertz. It's a receiver. Okay, so now I have these two custom channels. I've got my IFB crew channel and I've got my VOG channel, and there it is, right in the middle of a mess, right? But I locked it because, hey, it always works. We don't want to change it. We don't want to mess with it. But I could unlock it and move it wherever I want to. Let's see, my view changed a little bit there.
But basically, so that you
say,
can coordinate around that, one thing that's not connected to Wireless Workbench, Wireless Designer. But Wireless Designer will then coordinate based on that fixed frequency.
Yes, exactly. It will take it into consideration for third-order intermods and place everything else around it so that the other things don't conflict. But I unlocked it and moved it up here where I think this will be better for it. And as I said before, look at all the intermods. As we keep adding channels, and there's more and more of those third-order intermods. It's kind of cool to see them move as we move the channels. So that kind of covers custom channels. The one thing I didn't cover was that you can import channels from a file. So as an example, what I did is, I thought I had one in here. Oh yeah, they're not custom channel files. It is an IAS coordination report. This is another bit of software that is only for offline coordinating, but it's a really good package that's used a lot. And I use it when I'm going to do like a comprehensive remote coordination that has a lot of different types of systems in it. So what I did is I did a quick coordination with IAS and exported it to an HTML report, and now I can add that in here, and all those channels will be mixed in with what I've got. And notice now I've got a bunch of conflicts.
Wow, okay, so there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. So now my goal originally was to have the same kind of system with the same number of channels as what I have hooked up. So now what I can do, let's say I did that offline coordination with IAS, I'm bringing it in here. Now I can actually merge my live channels with these custom channels, which means that I'm going to gradually take away custom channels because they're becoming live channels, if that makes sense. So I'm going to merge this one with this frequency. Basically, I'm putting my connected channels onto these frequencies that I worked out via IAS. So you can see the power in this. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of power here, and this program is used by tons of people for a lot of different reasons, but you can see the power in it.
Absolutely. Well, I've been using this. God, I hate when I talk about decades, but like I've been using it for a long time, and I've seen it through a lot of iterations. So it's definitely a useful and powerful program, and it's been cool to see how it's evolved.
It has, and of course it'll keep evolving. As I mentioned before, there's definitely future plans for it in terms of future products and capabilities. And you know, we get lots of wonderful suggestions and requests for features. We try to compile all those into, let's say, a bin, a folder somewhere, and we sort through those every now and again because I would say that the way the features come to life is if we get multiple requests. Various people and doing various different kinds of work all ask for the same kind of thing, and then it'll end up in there. I wish we could do every request, but it becomes impractical sometimes. So I think we've covered just about everything I really wanted to cover. The walk test recorder is a cool feature I want to touch on briefly, and that is, again, it's going to be frame specific. So let me click on a frame like the 822. Walk test recorder is on this tab. And the way these work is that it really is a recorder. We need to open a file. I'm going to create a new file here. Live stream walk test 2. So now I've got a place to put this information, and I've got my channel choices here. I can pick either channel 1 or channel 2 of this unit to walk test. If I have audio from the receiver connected to my laptop through a sound card, I can even record the audio, which is kind of a cool thing. So in other words, oftentimes with a walk test, we're going to walk around and say things like, I'm at stage left, I'm at stage right, I'm next to these lights, I'm walking outside. And so recording the audio is a good way to make that happen. So let me just get a transmitter turned on and synced quickly on one of these channels. So I'm going to do that here. Look at my transmitter tab. Send settings to transmitter. I'm going to hold them close to each other. And what do we got here? Some kind of mismatch. As one would expect for doing a live demo.
Of course. Well, it's, I'm sure there's...
So most likely what's happening is that it is, there's no key. So we've got an encryption type. Let me fix that quickly here. Encryption key type.
And while you're fixing that, that's just something interesting to note. We've been doing quite a bit of work with NFL teams, and they've been requiring encryption, and there's more than one that is using that has ordered Lectro DCR 822s with DBSMs to stuff in those player pads. So that's an interesting use case.
Yes, indeed. The law came down from the NFL that anything related to player miking, anything like that, needs to be encrypted, and I think they've required it to be AES 256-bit, which our stuff is compliant. But even one step further, we've got, and that's what we ran into here, is that we had a key type mismatch, is that the transmitter and receiver were set to different key profiles. The standard type is the one we have now, and I've got the transmitter set with a new key. But one of the types that we can do is what's called shared, and this was developed specifically for sports. It allows you to share a unique key between hardware, between a couple of transmitters and a couple of receivers. And that's important because oftentimes you'll have more than one receiver picking up the same signal, like one on a camera, like a DCH-R or a 822, and then maybe one in a rack somewhere, like a DSQD. So the idea of sharing that key between multiple receivers requires a particular kind of key management, and we offer that. It's called shared. So there's actually 4 types, and that's one of them, specifically designed for sports.
Cool.
All right, so now that we've got this going, and I actually got it to turn green, which is amazing considering this is live, we'll go back to the walk test recorder, and I will start my recording. Okay, and there we see coming in from the left, what it's showing you is the diversity, state, and then audio levels. And we're not actually recording audio. I don't have a way to do that handily, but it is showing you the audio levels and whether or not you're hitting the limiter and so on. So if I get really right up on this thing, 1, 2, hey, 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 you can see that top out, okay? Now, if I were to start walking around, and I'm going to simulate that by covering the antenna. Now I can see my diversity state changing, and I can see my RF levels dropping as I get further away. So, and this is all recorded to a file that you can reference later. You can pull it up and sort of watch it and see what happened. And if you record the audio, you can hear yourself saying where you are. So that's the walk test recorder. Definitely a handy tool for sussing out like a new location and seeing what your coverage is like, your antenna coverage.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like if you find a hole, you could either move your antennas or add another zone if you've got a combiner of some kind.
Exactly. All right, so we covered a ton of ground. I want to find out if there's any other questions. We've gone on for a bit here, and I'm happy to answer questions if anyone wants clarity on anything we showed them or talks about anything we haven't shown.
That's fantastic. Well, we've caught up on the questions, so we'll leave a little bit we'll just chat for a minute while we leave space for other people to engage. But something we touched on a video that is going to be released probably next week is how nice the factory is. I mean, you gave me a tour quite some years ago, but Peter had been as well. And yeah, it's just amazing how much you do in-house. You think about made in the USA, and it's really, most of it's made right there.
It is, yes, and thanks for mentioning that. We're proud of that fact. We invest in our infrastructure here, our machinery, our people, training. We're all about sort of vertical integration. We like to do it here for a variety of reasons. It keeps the control here, and it actually keeps the cost moderate. If we went out to a lot of sub-suppliers, they have to make their profit. So that's another way to look at it. But the latest machine, and we just put a video up on our YouTube channel recently about, it's an optical inspection machine that looks at circuit boards with high-resolution cameras. So as they come out of the circuit board manufacturing pick-and-place room, that's where the circuit boards are populated with parts and the solder is melted and flown. Circuit boards come out of there, they go into the optical inspection machine, and it looks at them literally under a microscope, but digitally. And spits out a report that shows any problems with the quality of the solder joints, part orientation, correct parts or not. The details are staggering. So this is a way, as parts and circuit boards get smaller and denser, this is a way to keep up with making sure the quality is very high as those circuit boards get used in the manufacturing process.
So each circuit board would go through this and get looked at and examined, and in addition to once it's tested or once it's installed, being tested for functionality.
That's right. That's a separate test. This is just sort of physically looking at it. And then there's QC steps. We have two departments. One is production test, manual production test, where technicians will hook up an individual board, program it with the firmware, and then take it through all its steps. And then there is ATE, or automatic test environment, where that's done more in a semi-automatic way. So every board is tested for all the functionality. And then once the product is assembled, there's one final QC step where someone puts a battery in it, turns it on, tunes it, and listens to it.
Very cool. All right.
All done here.
It's all done in New Mexico, Nuevo Mexico.
Yeah.
And it's really not far from Albuquerque. It depends what side of the river you're on, but it's west side of the river, right? Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. Rio Rancho is northwest of Albuquerque. I live in Albuquerque, so I commute every day. It's a 12-mile drive, which isn't terrible. And
And
part of the Albuquerque Metro.
and how? Wait, there's a metro?
Well, 500,000, Yeah.
Oh! I thought when you say metro, I'm like subway. There's a subway.
Oh no,
I've
no,
never seen it.
The metro area, no
I
subway
see.
here.
I got you. So we did get an additional question. Said great presentation. Off topic, and this is again future seeing. What about a digital SSM?
Oh yes, that's something on our minds, and can't really say when, but yeah, that's very close to our plans.
Something that's being thought about for sure. And also just to follow up on something we talked about at NAB, I know you have the new bag frames and rack frames that are kind of universal for anything. How are those coming?
Very well. We should have the bag frames ready to go by the end of this month. The last thing we're waiting for is the molded plastic parts, which took a couple iterations. Those are now done. And the UMC WBD, that is the rack for any portable receiver. The only thing we're waiting for after those plastic parts come in is the DC tails that we're having made outside. So those are both very, very close.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're ready to wrap up unless there's anything else you want to share, Karl.
Well, we covered a lot. You know, I wanted to get the details of Wireless Designer out there and answer the questions of those who have asked, and I hope we did that. And, you know, I appreciate everybody's time. This has been fun to do. I appreciate the fact that you guys, Nick and the Gotham team, Peter and everybody, and Joe are, you know, hosted this. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being here and the time that you took to prepare, and also for the deep dive, because, you know, as somebody who's been using this for longer than I care to mention, I learned a bunch. So I appreciate it. It'll be useful for the next time I have to do a job out of the office.
Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, perfect. Well, Karl, thanks again for being here. And for everybody that watched and commented or watched or will watch in the future, thank you for watching. Please remember to follow us on Facebook and X and Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok. You can see this video and more at gothamsound.tv. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or future things you want to see, you can email us at info@gothamsound.com. Thank you so much for watching.
See you, everybody. Thank you.